Breast cancer is interesting because there are certain genetic conditions like BRCA1, right? BRCA1, BRCA2, which are very highly associated with breast cancer. So we know that. But it's interesting because if you look at how many people, if you take people with the BRCA1 and 2 mutations and say how many will develop breast cancer and compare them to a cohort from the 1940s or something like that, what you find is that in the 40s, they had much, much lower rates of breast cancer compared to 2020, for example. So again, what's the difference? And of course, it's difficult to compare going back in time like that because the data is not always so good. But the difference is that probably there was a lot less hyperinsulinemia because there's a lot less obesity. You know that that's probably true. So the idea is that it's not simply one thing, right? It's the seed and the soil. So you have the seed, which is the BRCA1, which puts you at risk. But if you don't give it the proper soil, and in this case, breast cancer loves insulin and loves glucose. So you put it in an environment where everybody's eating natural foods, insulin levels are low, fasting periods are regular and relatively prolonged, keeping insulin low, that seed has no chance to germinate because you're not giving it the growth factors it needs. Now you take that same patient and you stick them in the 2020s and they're eating all the time. They're eating processed foods, which spikes your insulin. Glucose is everywhere. Well, now you've got the seed, which has always been there, but you've given it the proper soil. It's going to grow into a full-fledged cancer. And this is why people are so, oh, then they say, oh, it's because I have the mutation. It's like, yes, but if you had the mutation and you lived 100 years ago where there wasn't all this processed foods, you would not have developed cancer. So, this idea that it's all genetic, which I see all the time, is so completely at odds with the reality, but people don't like to blame themselves in terms of the diets and so on. We want to live with this idea that cancer is just a genetic lottery, but it's not true. Like the rates of colorectal cancer are skyrocketing, right? You see the number of young people with cancer, colorectal cancer, for example. They've had to lower the screening age of colonoscopy from 50 to 45 because there were so many 40-year-olds who are developing colorectal cancer. Well, what's the difference? You didn't see it in the 80s because the foods we were eating were completely different. They were not this highly ultra processed foods and so on. So now you've had the seed has been there all along, but the soil, the fertile soil to grow a cancer, which is eating all the time and so on. It's not anybody's fault. It's just a product of the environment that we live in.